Hello. Are we live? Yeah, desktop audio. It's a little loud. Testing one. Hello, hello. Okay. And let's look at the screen. Yes. All right, let me know. Yeah, that's loud. Let me know if this gets super loud, guys. I'm checking and it looks like it went into the red. And maybe that's a function. Yeah, I got it right next to my mouth. Let me move this thing back a little bit. All right, and I'll check the sensitivity. Yeah. There we go. This might get a little loud, but I'll keep my distance from it. How you doing? Good morning. Happy Saturday. All right. Now, I want to thank you all because we're doing this. I didn't have to wake up early and take my kids to the swim meet. My wife got that honor, and I had a great excuse. So thank you so much. Now, this is this is the second to last day, right? The course, let's walk through this right now. The course, Anatomy for Artists, is closing tomorrow. And so now's the time to get yourself in and join the fun. The course, I want to show you a little bit about what it's about, but you have to scroll down a little bit and you'll see it's 4 courses. And you're going to get the anatomy of the torso, which we're going to look at. You're going to get sculpting and constructing the head. And you're going to get the anatomy of the arm and hand, anatomy of the leg and foot. So I just want to be clear on that because I've had a lot of questions. And so the goal behind this for me is for you to learn kind of a step-by-step construction of the human figure. That's really one of the most important things that we're going to get, is that it is step-by-step and that it is construction. And I know those words are really low or small right there, but it's really important that you understand that, this isn't just marketing. I'm writing this to explain what we're doing. So then you got 3 options. You can come in and sample it, right? There's actually already 500 people that are actually in the course, including those that have sampled it. And then you can either do the monthly payment, which is a great way to get in. And if you need to upgrade to the one-time payment once you see the quality of the content, then I don't have any problem. I'll send you a link. Or there's the one-time payment. All right, those are the options. You're going to get access to our Discord community. We've got a bunch of downloadable scans. Some you might see today. And then you get all of these courses, the 4 courses. All right. And so if you guys don't know me, let me show you my profile picture. Here's my Instagram. This will tell you a lot about me. This I posted this, which goes over what we did yesterday. And so this video to me is really special. It's actually been viewed, I forget how much, it's like a couple 100,000 times. This is the second posting of it. Everything to me is process. And what you're seeing in that video is you're seeing not necessarily the process of sculpting. You're seeing the process of thinking. And that's the part that gets missed a lot, right? So I could get into ZBrush and I could show you guys, like, here's my brushes, here's me making form. But what you're not seeing is what's going on inside my mind and how I'm thinking about form. And that's the most important part, right? If you learn how to think about form, you go to marble, you can go to clay, you can draw. There's a lot of options, right? We need to learn how to think about form. And that's the goal. My goal for you is that you learn to see. And in order to see, you have to have little bits of knowledge, and you have to have them presented in a way that's different than just like, here I am sculpting this cool character in ZBrush. You got to dive in. And this video that we are looking at this is all about the thinking process. So it starts with the 5 volumes of the head from George Bridgman. So once we've got those 5 volumes, we go to the skull volumes, the nose and facial volumes. We define the volumes of the brow, the volumes of the eye, ear, and then we start to flesh the model. All of that is something that we did yesterday. So make sure you check out the lives yesterday, which you should be able to do. If you go into my profile, you go drop week live demos, and there's day 1, 2, 3, 4. And so day 3 was a really fun day where we went in and started to create these different moments of thinking and try to make, our own sculpt from that. Okay. Does anybody in the ZBrush land know where that comes from? Okay. I'm such a fan of Paul. All right. So let's walk through what you are getting, and then let's get into the meat and potatoes of today. And let me make sure you guys can actually hear me. Miguel, nice to see you. Teresa, nice to see you. Jason Burns, lovely to see you. Okay. Everybody can hear me okay? Give me a quick shout out. So there are 63 lessons in here. Those lessons are compact. Like there'll be an hour of sculpting that gets compressed into 10 minutes of lessons. Like let's look at the sculpting. This one that's a female, so it's going to have breasts in it. Let's just save ourselves the censorship. This is the one that I think is probably the best to look at. So it's 7 minutes, but it took a lot longer than that to sculpt. And so this is one of the components inside of this program. I give you models, right? And it's a complete me model. It's a pick me model. And so this pick me model right here, this is the basic foundation that you then go and apply the anatomy to. It's like sculpting with training wheels. And that's important in the beginning, because there's so much crazy stuff. You might get the surface right, but then you get what's underneath wrong. And so I've made the underneath where it's right. It can get moved around a bit, but it's generally right. And then you go in and you go through a series of steps. So first we draw in to identify. Okay, this is just normal learning. When you want to learn, you have to identify the thing to learn. Then you have to go in and start to describe it to yourself a bit. So I'm going in and creating structural planes, really setting, and this is my specific way of sculpting, lots of structural planes, lots of movement. And then we go in, and once we're done with structure, we might go in, where do we get to the rake brush? Yeah, that's a good stopping point for us. So we talk about all of this, we get ourselves to this place, and then we come in with the rake brush, and we start to just make this form a little bit nicer and cleaner, and start to give it a little bit more surface quality without losing too much of the movement, if you understand what I mean. Like, we're not trying to make a neoclassical work here. I'm trying to create as much motion and movement as I can. All right, and so there's a bunch of this, okay? And then in the head, there's 20 lessons that are posted now. There's 30 planned. So this constructing the female head we went through yesterday a bit, and so this is all going to get posted. But we're going through, and what I want you to just be mindful of, because this is the thinking process. Right here on the screen, you're looking at the what's called the lateral palpebral ligament, or raphe. Lateral palpebral raphe. That is, why is that back? Okay, there we go. Thanks, Ashton. That's a huge idea. The fact that there's something this far, like there's this structure, because most people put eyelids, and they just take the eyelid and they go, and attach the eyelid right to the bone. And that's not what happens. There's a space. There's a bone. There's a ligament. That's a space. And then the tarsal plates will connect to that. Knowing that that space is there is one of the pieces of knowledge that goes to the thinking process. And so that's what we cover, is the thinking process. And then before we get into the orbicularis oculi, the eye muscle itself, we learn about the structure underneath. We create the tarsal plates, the palpebral ligaments, palpebral raphe. We then go in and start to identify fat pads, the orbital septum. So before we've even gotten to the eye, the orbicularis oris, we have covered multiple structures of the eye. If you do not know these structures, you're going to be at a loss when it comes to analyzing the surface and trying to figure out what the heck is going on. Then and this is the last thing I'll show you, and then there's a digital dissection section, which I'm actually editing and adjusting right now. I've got a couple of things. We go into forensic tissue depth markers. We do not do this at the forensic level. That's important. We simplify things greatly. And this actually has to get completely re-edited, which I'll do once I get to Pietrasanta in a week. And there we go. All right. So let's get in and sculpt the torso this Saturday morning. And thank you guys for being here and for being a part of this. I haven't done this in I don't know, 4 years. It's been a long time. I mean, I've done a little bit here and there, but not a full 5 days. I forgot how much fun I have. So I'm glad that you guys are here and that I'm not doing this by myself. All right, let's get in. And last thing. Just the last reminder. After you've seen the course, remember, Kingslien.art, you got a day. A day and some change. So don't wait around. Sign up. And make sure to follow me on Instagram so that you can get all these little updates that we're doing. Okay, now let's pull this in. One of the things we did for the anatomy course is build our own écorché. Did I do the legs? Yeah. And so this is built off of scanned data. I don't know why. I just love the green. It came in and I was like, I think I'm going to keep that. So this scanned data is going to, it's got a lot of information for us. And I've translated that into the anatomy so that you can get a sense of, it looks like I have to raise the clavicle there. So you can get a sense of how some of this complexity interweaves, right? So for example, how does the pectoralis go from its origins along 3 places into its insertion? The bicep, do I have a bicep? I should have a bicep sculpted for that one. Let's see, the arm, the quads, the upper arms. Oh. Yeah, they were all hidden. Biceps. Close that. All right, starting to understand how the pectoralis wends its way. What the bicep does. All of that. This is what I'm really excited to help you guys understand and help you see. Okay, and so this is all part of what we are going to be covering inside of the course. All right, today is torso or figure sculpting. What is the exact description of what we want to be doing today? Start with this, guys. What are the questions or the problems that you have with the figure or the torso? What are the questions, what are the problems you have with the torso, sculpting it, all of that jazz? Let's leave this in the background. Here's the head. I'm excited to get that out to the world. And then, okay, this is the marble this is a concept I'm working on for a marble sculpture. I'm just doing this from imagination, so that smile is, I'm not there yet. But this just, so you guys can see, I'm a huge fan of Mestrovich. And so I'm using this one as my inspiration because he's doing a lot here in this that's really interesting sculpturally. This one right, where'd it go? Girl with violin. Notice how it's almost a 2D piece. Ivan Mestrovich worked a lot with relief. Relief was a big thing for him, and I'm again a huge fan. So I'm thinking when I'm in Pietrasanta, I'm making my own version of this. Okay, let's get that out of the way. There are a couple of ways for us to start with the torso. Okay, so I'm going to just come and start with a simple sphere. There. You can start with a simple sphere, right? I have tools that I give the students because a simple sphere is super hard, very, very hard. I like to start with Roboman. So I have a couple of different versions of Roboman. Here's one version of Roboman. I've got like a superhero version of Roboman who's like super bulky. But that's overkill. We don't need all that. We just need some basic shapes. And when we're in digital sculpting land, one of the most powerful parts of this equation is really just how we're able to set ourselves up for success, right? And so I have here all the basic foundations of what I need. I have the rib cage mass. I have the pelvis mass. I have the head mass, right? And then not only that, but I actually have form concepts for everything else. Now, we talked about form concepts yesterday, and so form concepts are really this idea. It's like furniture is a high-level concept, right? So furniture is the top, and then we go down and we're like, well, there's a couch, chair, there's table, right? So those are all on the same line. They're all furniture, but they're elements of furniture. And then below chair, there's Victorian chair, there's stool, there's other elements. And so when we are sculpting and creating form, I want you guys to be thinking about this idea of form concepts. And I want you to be thinking that, all of these shapes that we have here, all of these parts of the body right here, it's not just bicep. It's actually could be the cylinder of the upper arm. But does that look like a cylinder to you? I'm choosing not to make a cylinder. In fact, what I'm choosing to do is make these into these blocks. And that's really, for me, incredibly useful in the upper arm because there is such a strong side plane that you can see. Don't trust me, though. Let's bring in some scans so that we can have clarity. Kingslien scan set. I think somebody told me... Oh, yeah, we can just use this. It's a lot of files, so hold on a second. Alrighty. Some nudity here. So let's start with the back. All right, let's start with this guy. This is one of the scans that you sculpt with. Do you see anything? Do you see the block? That's why we do it. So that's the actual form that we need to be thinking about there. And now that's different than what we do in the neck. So this is a block. This is a cylinder. The neck very much maintains that cylindrical quality. The rib cage gets a little bit different. It's a little bit dicey. What is the actual shape of the rib cage? Well, let's go, I'm going to say, let's clone this. I'm going to undo some of that. Voila. Okay. Is that okay? Yeah. Let's get rid of the head as well. Cool. All right, so I'm going to delete hidden. And I'm going to close the holes. Let's duplicate that. Now, let's take a look at what we might have for the rib cage. So I'm going to come around, and we should probably draw in a few landmarks, right? This is the important part of landmarks. So let's go in with the Pen A brush, and we're just going to establish a few. So if you're not familiar with these, this will be a good overview. Pit of the neck, clavicle. These things are much larger than you think. Sternum, but really what you have is you have the manubrium. Then you have the sternal body, the xiphoid process. Then you've got something really interesting going on down here. I'm going to skip for a second, come around to the back. C7. And C7 overlaps in terms of the way that the vertebrae work. They have a body like this. They've got their like articulating parts, and then they've got a spinous process. Okay, and the spinous process drops down. So right here, let's just call that C7. We've got the articulating processes, and then we've got the spinous process. C7 drops, and it basically, where you see C7 is behind that is actually the first thoracic vertebrae. Okay, so now let's go and say we've got our spine, which is great, love it. This rib cage is a mass. The rib cage, the number one thing you need to understand is that it is a solid mass, right? So when it encounters not solid mass, it's going to insert inside of that. It's always going to assert its primacy of form, okay, which means it's whatever shape it is, let's call it an oval. That oval is going to exist no matter what. I need more coffee. And so I know that this is going to be roughly right around here. This is going to be one of the last ribs. There could be another one down in here that I don't see, but that's a good indicator as I move around. And then I can say, all right, well, there's a rib here. There's a rib here. So I'm at least in good territory. Okay, now I'm not even getting into these bumps yet. I'm only focusing on these ones on the side. Now I'm gonna say come down, and this is the lumbar section moving up. So this is the sacrum right here. And then you have these wings of the ilium. People don't realize that, especially males, the male hip, like this thing is way the hell up here. A lot of times people think that like that's the point right there, but it's not. The ilium goes up even further. The point is actually higher up. Let's go about right there. It's getting a little confused there because the form has come over the top. See how close these guys are? And then this is going to stretch. All right, so now I'm going to try to find some shapes back here. Do you see a shape like that? And a shape here? I feel like those are two separate shapes, and I can kind of see they break. A lot of what we're doing is looking for these breaks in the surface. They start to tell you, look at that. And then this goes, and then this is going like this. That's going to tell us there's a form break there that we need to be mindful of. So I'm looking for, this is going to be one part of the erector spinae group, and then this is going to be another. And then underneath this erector spinae group that you see right here on the outside, this is actually quite connected to ribs. So, and there I see a rib right there. I see ribs. And then, I don't know. This area, I don't know yet. But what I do see is I see a bump, a bump, a bump. So right about here, and I'm going to just trace right into those bumps. Maybe even. Do you see how the ab has this shape where it bumps? It's right there. This could be the 7th rib, which we're seeing more because this arm is getting, the pectoralis is being pulled this way, so its form is receding, whereas here the form is pushing in and flooding. This is receding, this is flooding. And in the flooding, it's obfuscating the 7th rib, if that's the 7th rib. 6th or 7th, I'm not sure. Then right in here, that form's receding, so we see it. But what's important to note at this point, at this juncture, the really important thing to be understanding is that wherever that xiphoid process is, which is actually probably right around here, this form is going to come down from the top of that xiphoid process, and this ab, generally that intercostal arch is going to go underneath that. So that's going to be part of what creates that form, that the ab moves up, right? So you can find the high point of that form, and from there, you can be like, oh, there it is. And then, come on. And then we can probably, if we say 8th rib, we can probably drop down. Now, I feel like I'm adding a rib here. Let's just keep it simple. So I'm not going to get into the meat and potatoes of discovering where all those are yet, right? This is something that you need to take time and have some, and be intellectual about this a little bit. Try to figure out, where is all of this crazy? But the signpost that I will give you is look for that bump of the ab, of that first ab. Cut through that to create your intercostal arch. And then from that intercostal arch, then you can kind of pull around to the rest of your rib. It gets so complicated because there's, on this side, everything's kind of receding. The form is being stretched. And then on this side, it's being compressed. And so even the external oblique, you're now starting to see the external oblique overlap everything else, right? Lots of crazy, but this is why we go in and we do the exercises, and this is exactly an exercise that you do in the torso, where you go in and try to draw, let's see, where is it on the obliques? Drawing the external oblique. and you try to find the serratus, you try to find the external obliques, you try to get all of those different parts and all of those different pieces, okay? Really helps if you can kind of get in and sort that out. But what I really wanted to show you guys was, notice how there's a wall, there's this kind of curved wall right here. This is the side of the rib cage. This is the wall of the rib cage. And this, as soon as it opens up, this creates a really interesting form transition. So if you were to see a cross section of this, which is actually something we can do. What you see happening is you see the rib cage is containing form here. And then as soon as that form is, like that containment field is opened, the abs are going to come out. So you're going to have a cross section where it's like rib, dun dun, a plane change, abs, a plane change, ribs. The abs are going to pull outwards from that area, right? And so the reason why I tell you this is because a lot of times when people, and myself included, are looking at this, let's go ahead and simplify that again. We're looking at, 100% please. We're looking at this and we're saying, well, shouldn't that be what's that bump right there? And that's abs. The abs are the ones that are rib cage, ab. The abs are pushing out. Why are they pushing out? McDonald's, tests, just all your guts. You've got spleen, you've got a kidney, you got a bunch of stuff in there, okay? And the spine isn't as deep as you might think. If we come in and we say, all right, that's the ilium, and let's come in and say, all right, that's the top. Let's go and say, all right, that's the spinous process is about right there. The actual, you say the spinous process, articulation, and then the spine, the vertebrae. The vertebrae are quite thick. So within the human body, if you guys look at scan MRIs, you look at them from the side, you can see that the vertebrae themselves, they take up a good bit of that space. So everything else is getting pushed out this way. Pretty crazy how much of the torso the spine actually takes. Okay, let's clean this up. And so having done the drawing, let me see. I'm going to come in and say, let's get and now let's cut off the shoulders. I think that's reasonable. Did I already duplicate this? Maybe. All right, but anyways, I'm gonna go in now and say delete hidden, and I'm gonna close the holes, and there you go. Okay, so that's my torso, and so now if I turn solo off and transparency, now I can go in and start to explore the mass inside all of this. So I'm going to quickly just go in and start to sculpt the rib cage. And this is an exercise I want you guys to do. It's an important exercise. I have done this exercise multiple times to help me understand what it was that I was seeing, right? And and train myself to start to understand these landmarks. This is why learning anatomy through sculpture, in my opinion, beats every other method out there. And I'm not alone. Thomas Eakins, when he took over the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts, after he studied with one of the preeminent French academy teachers, he instituted sculpting for every student. Almost ready. I'm grossly simplifying things. But we started this conversation to help us understand the shape of the rib cage. All right, so I'm sculpting what I know, and then I'm going to go through and I'm going to break that down. I'm not going to leave you alone and be like, well, I don't understand. I'll break this down. Okay, let's take a look at some questions. The rib cage was the hard part. And thank you for answering. I asked you guys earlier, what's the hard part in understanding the form? And we just lucked out as I see this comment that the rib cage is one of the hard parts. Can you talk about digitation? The point where the tendon, muscles, and bones connected. Which muscle? Thank you and crazy. Yes. Okay, good. All right. So now let's turn solo off. And just for the sake of argument, I'm going to scale the rib cage inside there. Now, a couple of landmarks, a couple of things that are really important for us to understand. Okay, let us append this. Yes. Let's get a measurement in place. All right, and really, it's super important to have measurements. I'm going to look at the head, go roughly here and say, all right, that's okay. I'm going to go into preference transpose and I say, that's 1 unit. It's just whatever random I want. Okay, so that's 1 unit. And I'm not a big fan of those marks. There, I'm going to set the major ticks to 2 marks and the minor ticks to 2 marks, 3, 4, 4 marks. There we go. So now we have half and fourths. All right. Now that done and said, how long is the rib cage? Rib cage is supposed to be about 1 3/4 heads. So if we come there to there, it's looking like 2 heads. So we're actually in pretty good territory, but I'm not feeling it. I'm a little skeptical of that. So let's play. And remember, that's the axes we're playing with. Okay, the clavicles can move up and down, but I'm following the sternum. And then from the sternum, you put a 90-degree angle and straight out. Then that angle, that's going to be, for the most part, that's going to be the angle that you see. It's not entirely true. The ribs do compress. There's no question that they compress. There's no question that they expand. How else do you breathe? Obviously. There's a lot of stuff going on there. Okay? So this is actually quite possibly accurate, but I'm going to make a couple of changes. I'm going to get that just a little bit more in line like that. And I just am having a hard time. Let's get this over a little bit. I think, yeah. Yeah, that side had gotten a little compressed. Okay. There we go. Okay, let's talk about the rib cage. As it is right now, it's a bit of a mess. So let's define a few things. Let's define the pit of the neck. Sternum. Opening for the intercostal arch. There we go. Now, from this, we can start to work planes. And that's really the big part that we need to focus on now, right? What's the cross section of a rib? So if we were to look at this and say, that's pretty... What is this cross section from a top view? We're not doing too shabby if we say that's the front view. This is not too shabby, but I want to be a little bit more specific about it. So I'm going to take a plane. That's the front plane. Okay, and then you're going to go straight in the back, and you're going to say that's roughly the back plane, although we're going to divide that. And then I'm going to say there's a side plane, but what I want you to notice in the grand scheme of things, there's a flat side plane that actually starts 1/2 back. And then there's this nice broad transitionary plane. Like that. Now, in the back, as I mentioned, you've got the spinous process, you've got the vertebrae. Come on, Ryan, pull it together. It's not quite, there's definitely a point right here. I'm tripping over my words. You know what? The easiest thing is going to be is if we just introduce the planes. There's going to be a transition plane, and then there's going to be a down plane, an in plane to the actual spine. So in the back, you should see this M structure. It's really important. Later on, the scapula actually rests on that plane. And so it creates that slope that we have. Okay. Spinous process is going to be here. Articulating plates is going to be there. And then the body of a vertebrae is going to be roughly in that area. Okay. So this is what we need. We need to establish this sort of transitionary plane. Thank you, Norton, but you need to be uninstalled. And so let's see, how are we going to do this? While it's here like this, I'm going to actually just draw these out for you. You son of a lock. I'm probably going to completely undo all of this. By the way, I'm using Epic Pen here, if you're wondering. Pit of the neck. We can take a plane from the pit of the neck down like this to the 8th rib. Like that. Okay. That plane extends down a little bit. That's great. And then we look at this from a side view. And we started that plane right there, right? We're going to move this around. It's not just a straight up and down. It actually is curving. Get that. This is a little, let me show you a trick. I need to match the front and the back. So I'm going to position this where I think it matches. I go into Document, Z-App Link, and I'm going to click Front. And this plugin creates a back. So then I can go straight down. Cool beans. Now let's go. Dig that trough in. Voila. Okay. So that's starting to establish that M shape of the back. And then now let's get the rest of the planes. Build this plane. All right. And of course, I'm going fast. I always feel urgency when I do live stuff. Take your time. So you can see I sculpt down the form and across the form. It's kind of a key component to my sculpting is I sculpt down and across. Make any adjustments you feel like you need to. It's definitely thinner at the top. We've kept it a little artificially inflated. Definitely wider at the base. And now you can establish your planes a little bit better. Actually, that was pretty accurate the way it was. The rib cage just needs to be a little bit bulkier. There you go. We want the opening of the rib cage to match the opening of the neck. And now I'm not sold on how far down this is. I feel like it needs to go. Yeah, you can see there's an actual rib right there. Okay. Now let's go back into, so that's our rib. Let's go into this piece. We're going to invert this selection. Actually, I can't do it. I got to do it from this view. There we go. And excuse me. All right, that'll work. Duplicate, and let's delete hidden and close holes. And this one's going to need some dynameshing because that's a really awkward angle right there. Now we're going to get the box of the pelvis structure. I'm not thinking the ilium, the actual ilium, the pelvis bone. The pelvis bone itself is whack. Trying to understand all the stuff going on with that, man, that's some work. So take the class for that. But today we're just going to try to institute a block structure that can encompass that. And this block, as I alluded to before, let's go ahead and dynamesh this. 256. The block isn't just a square. It's actually a tall rectangle. Okay? With men, the hip is taller and skinnier. The only thing we're passing through there is BS, right? Females, you got a lot more stuff going on, and so the structure is wider generally. And that's not the case for everybody, but generally. Hey, Arthur. I have been... Oh, I lost my place. Where am I? There we go. And then let's go ahead and let's look at this model and say, turn perspective off. And I'm going to look. You see how I'm lining up the front. I'm lining up right there. I'm going to say, all right, let's assume that that's the front. So then I'll come in with, let's say, clip curve. Perfect. Now on the back, let's just cut some of the butt off. There you go. Now let's look at this from a side view. Actually, you need to look at it from the front. And so for us to understand like how this cube is going to fit here, you have to understand the landmarks. ASIS, ASIS. It's actually, this one always gave me trouble. You need that angle. And then it goes square from there. Okay, this becomes just leg muscles and butt muscles. That's the TFL right there. So now, with that done and said, I'm going to cut across and cut across. Voila. Okay. Now, one of the exercises that I talk a lot about is squaring the sphere. And this is why. Because you need to be able to look at a form like that and start to get that thing to straighten up. I'm going to cheat a little bit here using the clip. But you'll see that that clip, it doesn't solve everything, right? So just because I'm doing that doesn't mean it's all done. Okay, I'm not going to spend a ton of time there because we just want this to be a nice stand-in. So if you don't mind, I'm going to rush that and leave us with a little bit of a chunky sphere. All right. Now let us scale that in a little bit. Yeah. And I think that's going to go to how high? No, it doesn't. Do you see that there's a the ilium goes like that. And then the sit bones are going to be down around here. So now there. Okay. Of course, that's excuse me, going to cause problems here because of the structure of the pelvis. So if we want to, one of the things that we can do is just start to make a little bit of the form here, excuse me, that that can sort this out. So from a side view, let's draw the block, and it looks a little skewed. So fix that. All right. From a side view, the pelvis fits into this, the ilium. And we're not going to do the ilium because it's a lot. But you can say if this is the box in which everything operates, let's say about 1/3, that's the ASIS. Another third, that's the pubic symphysis. That is not accurate, by the way. That's not the reality. There is a lot of variation there, but it'll work for us to get it. From the ASIS, the ilium falls backwards quickly. There's a slope, and that slope reaches about that halfway point and then starts to kind of come around, and it starts to serve for our sacrum. The ASIS comes in down to the pubic symphysis, and the pubic symphysis comes quite quickly down to the ischial spine, like this, that has an opening, and it's going to go about like that. Voila. All right, and then the sacrum drops about right there. So if I get rid of those training wheels, this all needs to go away. This all could go away, and then the back is, I don't have too many problems with the back. So I can just bevel that edge. And then carve out a little bit for the belly. Down to the pubic symphysis, which is about 1/3. And there's a lot we can do at that point too. You know, this, I'm almost sculpting the pelvis at this point. And pay attention to how I'm actually, a lot of it is carving away planes. This is just one of the ways I love to sculpt. All right, almost done with that. Let's carve this back, this back. I struggled a lot with how to teach you the pelvis, so I should show you that lesson. Because if you sculpt it the way I'm doing it right now, it requires a lot of knowledge. That can be, it's just hard. A lot of students get lost here because the process of learning this is it's not supported enough, right? Like there's a lot of elements of form here that may not make any sense to you as you're watching this, you know. But I have all these form concepts in my mind. I know exactly, you know, what I'm doing. I know exactly what I want, including, you see here now, fixing this. Okay, but let's go ahead and take a look at this pelvis. First thing we talk about when we talk about the pelvis is that you start with this kind of bucket. This is the Gottfried Bommes concept. And then we cut that bucket into something that's just a little stepped. Again, this is a Gottfried Bommes straight from his book, straight from his brain. I'm not making that up. All right, and then we go in, and I have a method here. Once we have that bucket, we then use Z-Modeler with simple steps that, like, I mean, it happens within 10 minutes. You actually have the pelvis. You just have to follow these steps fairly precisely. And then at the end of that, you have a pelvis that it's got all the information that you need, but it's simplified. And then we go in and we get crazy with the cheese whiz, and we actually start to use reference and sculpt what we can from that, right? And then it just becomes a fun sculpting exercise. And this is a male pelvis that we're doing. You can see how tall they are. It's pretty crazy. All right, so we're going to be fine with that. I'm going to be fine with that, okay? And so now, with that done and said, let's see how the rib cage works. Yeah, you can see the rib cage coming in. And most importantly, what I really want to draw attention to is the space in between. So you can do this right now while you're here with me. Just on camera, take your hand and try to put your hand in between your rib cage and your pelvis, somewhere around the halfway point. And what you'll probably see is you can probably get 2 fingers, 3 fingers is unlikely. The rib cage here and the pelvis, these guys are super close to each other, closer than you think. So something to pay attention to in your work. Let me see, do I have any subdivisions? Let's delete the lower on that. Yeah. Okay, and then I'm going to merge this down. Okay. That way I can see these guys together. Those masses are super important, obviously. So if we're talking about, adjusting and putting a figure in motion, you need to know where these are going to be. You need to understand the landmarks around them, like just right in this area. See how well having this form starts to help us understand, like, wow, look at that flat plane. And what we notice is this ASIS, we're off a little bit, but the ASIS is coming in, then the ilium is coming here, and then the ilium quite quickly changes direction and flows like around. If you look at the pelvis from a top view, and then the sacrum is here with its little tail, and then it connects to the rib cage, not the rib cage, but the spine. That's the base of the spine right there. And then somebody's belly comes out like that. Okay, and so point A, and then that quickly sweeps around. Okay, la-di-da, la-di-day. Some things to change, not a ton. All right. Masses of the figure. Any questions? Any questions? Let me look through what we got over here. Okay, Round Brush is saying this stuff is really helpful. I tried learning from the Anatomy for Sculptors book, but it's very light on actually sculpting methodology. Yeah, they're amazing at the breaking down the thinking. And I know Oldest personally, just phenomenal person, an amazing artist. This is where the rubber hits the road, right? And so that's why it's one of the things that's beneficial about a class and a video structure, where you can take the thinking process and now the rubber hits the road. So in the class, we have an educational loop. You first sculpt the muscle, which is an intellectual exercise. You then identify the muscle on scans, and then you sculpt the figure, basically. And so all of that, just in that area, that puts you into the position where it's like you have to think about all the stuff that's, that's relevant when you're out there on your own. You have to find the muscle, you have to problem solve, where is it placed, how's it going to operate, and all of that good stuff. And so now we're going to actually get in and start to do some sculpting, I think. Now that we've kind of talked about this and we've started to figure this out, we're going to go in and unpack some of this, maybe even in this figure, start to see if we can flesh out that anatomy once we understand it. Let me see if I'm in trouble anywhere. Recording's good, audio's good. Great. Okay. I like this figure to start with and to sculpt. I think it's a good, powerful figure for us to kind of work with. So I think the smart play would be for us to do something similar to what we would do in class. And I'll just do this live with you and explain it as I go. So in order to do this, we do need to grab some models. Okay. So as part of the course, I've given you guys a series of base meshes that you use, right? So this is one of the scans. So let me see. There you go. One of the scans, this one right here. You can see all this crazy, beautiful stuff, right? And then I've made a RoboMan. I've taken my RoboMan here, and I've made a version of that has the essential forms in there for you to kind of sculpt and take it from there, right? And so this way, what happens in this course is, you know, you're not sitting here thinking about the masses right off the bat. That's actually something we're going to do when I do the figure sculpting class. Your goal in this anatomy is that you learn the anatomy. So you actually want to get in and start to figure out, like, what is that bump? You know, what are all of these? Like, what are these striations? Why is it coming off of this? Why is there this kind of, it looks like there's a highlight there. It's a hard form, basically. I mean, look at on the side. Look at that hard form. This is what you take the anatomy class for. When you get into this is, you gotta wait until I get into the figure sculpting class, which I'm hoping to do this year as well. My idea this year is to just get all of my knowledge in place. Is that a good one? No, I think that's a photo reference. I don't have a scan for that. I kind of want that, but only if I have a scan. This one. This has got a lot more movement. Yes, this is the one we want. And it's male figure, so I don't have to worry about nudity. So, no. Where'd I put it? Can't wait until we get in and sculpt this one. Where'd you go? There you are. All right, so there's my figure and my scan. So let me go ahead and clone this one out. And then I'm just going to append it. So, where'd you go? Yes. Append. That didn't work. Okay, yeah, it worked. What's bothering me? Okay. And looks like they're not lined up. And now they are. Butt shot. Okay. Let's go transform, split screen, and let's select our sculpt, our block in, right? This has the massing. I've taken care of that pelvic structure that we talked about. I've taken care of the rib cage structure, and then there's other structures I've taken care of that we talk about in the course. For example, the scapula mass, right? And so that scapula mass, let's go ahead and let's go into the course and look at that. The pelvis, there's the shoulder girdle. We actually talk about modeling the scapula so that you can get your head around that. And you model a nice simplified scapula, very mechanical. And then you come in and you model the whole scapula group. Let's go ahead and go into the scapula group. You're going to build all of those muscles that help you create the scapula mass. Then you go in and you draw them because it's useful to make sure that you understand where the teres major is and how all of these forms interact. And then you go in and you sculpt. That is a female. That is a, yeah, I'll leave it at these thumbnails. and then you go in and sculpt that whole group. And of course, when you're doing the figure sculpting component of each module, you end up having to do a lot more sculpting, right? So you can see the back is done. There's a lot more. So that's one of the benefits, is we get to go in and really dive into all of these parts. But now let's go in and start to block in this figure. Sound like a plan? We have less than an hour. Arthur, yeah, the registration closes in essentially 2 days' time. It closes tomorrow night. And then after that, it's closed until I open it again, so that I can kind of control flow. And I'm a perfectionist, so I'm going to re-record half of the head lectures. So I'm going slowly, bit by bit. All right, I'm just looking through questions. Round tree, round brush, the sculpting, the stream is good. Torso, but the relationship to the rest of the figure, yeah. Okay. Okay, all right, yes, registration's limited. Okay, let's duplicate this and start crushing. I'm going to Dynamesh it with a little bit more geometry. But I do need to look through to see if there's any weirdness. If you're worried, you just smooth it out, and then you can undo. Even the fingers actually worked. Yeah, no weirdness. Fantastic. How do you start a sculpt? No, I did that wrong. Okay, that's okay. How do we start a sculpt? What are the first moves? This is really important for me, is that you start to identify these first moves. So I'm going to actually use pin A, and we're going to locate the bony landmarks. And so right off the bat, what I do is I use the side of the canvas as my guide. And of course, with the pin A brush and poly painting and ZBrush, very wise to divide it. Clavicle is there. Okay. This, where's the clavicle? And then let's get that. Yeah, that should be the clavicle right there. Now I'm using my pen. I'm just drawing the angles. I'm going to say, notice, I'm going to basically take this point and put it up against the edge, and then I'm going to see where that lines up somewhere in that spectrum. This is basically our digital equivalent to using calipers. So a traditional artist would use calipers, and they would mark all these out. And they, you know, a good one is going to, you know, be very careful with these measurements. They're not going to do it willy-nilly. Okay, I want to find where that point is. Okay, and so that's straight up and down, that's straight up and down. Let's find the belly button somewhere here, and then my cross section right there. All right, let's find that rib. I just draw a little line, come down, and triangulate. There you go. Then you can undo, and that's my point. Let's find the xiphoid process. Let's get the edge of that. There we go. Yeah, I feel comfortable with that. Okay, now we'll fake this rib cage. And you can see that's most likely the 8th rib right there. Where is that in ours? Let's just draw straight across and be like, all right, is that going to be our 8th rib? Yeah. Let's treat that. That's our 8th rib right there. The 8th rib, super important, guys. You see my forms aren't entirely lined up. Okay, now let's check from a side view. Yes. Yes. This could go forward. Yeah. That's actually pretty accurate. All right, let's do the back real quick. C7. It's pretty accurate. And I really should save. So let's save this. Class. Tell me this is day 4. Whew. I disappear for years and then do 5 in a row. It's good because the first day I was quite rusty. All right, we're just letting this save, and then I'm going to continue drawing out my landmarks. When I am sculpting myself, I don't draw the landmarks like this. I make the landmarks on the go, or I'll actually go into the clay brush and I just make little marks to just to remind myself that it's there. But when you are learning, I like to think of it in, there's 2 different modes. In one mode, you're in the library, and in the other mode, you're in the arena, right? And so you have to do both to grow. So go out there, sculpt, and just give it everything you got and try to figure it out, right? That's great. Most people spend their time there, and they die there, you know, because at the end of the day, if you don't spend time in the library, if you don't learn, if you don't practice, if you don't have a safe space, you're going to get frustrated quick. You're going to make the same mistakes over and over and over and over again. You're going to actually double down on those mistakes, and that's a big problem. You need to fix mistakes. You need to fix process. That's really the most important thing, is fix your process. All right, I finished saving. And so let's just delete. I just need to... I need to fix some of this. It's too much. Undo history. It's these guys. Okay, let me delete all of the scans because we have what we need now. Okay. All right, next time I'll save it. It'll go faster. All right, pen. Check your... What I'm checking here is the bottom. Yeah, I got it about right. Then we're going to pivot and that spine and just come straight down. All right, let's go clavicle, acromion process, spine of the scapula. That's the scapula. Try to keep forms in line. There's a great form I like to think of right here. So you can kind of see there's a V shape that's coming from the muscle itself, but there's actually another form right here that becomes really important later on. So hopefully we'll get a chance to sculpt it. Not a bad idea to throw these guys in there, right? Just so you have a sense of that later on. And then great trochanter is going to be that little divot right there. And that divot right there. All right. I'm a little nervous now. Let's go W. Okay, and well, you know what? Why don't we do this? Why don't we leave that there, and I'm going to duplicate this so I can always go back. But it's really hard to sculpt with the surface messy like that. All right, I'm going to start by establishing certain structural pieces. This is my method. Let's go in with this. I'm going to soften that a little bit. Yeah, that's a little better. This is going to be a real pain later. Trying to figure out how these guys all connect. What is that? It's a mask. Mostly what I'm trying to do from my own understanding of the muscles, this is what you get when you build them. I'm trying to create kind of a simple planar representation that's like a structural understanding, right? And so, for example, right here, you see I'm establishing the rib cage that we talked about. You can see I'm establishing the abs as they come out from that. And then I'm going to establish a little bit of the character of them. They're going to come down. And then right here at the belly button, they pick up. There's just a little bit more juice in the mix right there. Going to get that a little hit. Don't like that. Do not need crazy. All right, and I'm thinking big mass. And you see long strokes. Even if I'm wrong, long strokes and planes. What this really means is looking for the high point of a form. So I'm going to look for that high point. Yeah, it's about right there. And then I'm going to shave the plane from that high point. We're in digital sculpting, so we can build this, and we're modeling, essentially, so we can build this back and forth, up and down, right? But if you're carving in wood or marble, well, marble, it's really hard to put that back. If you're carving in wood, you just glue another piece of wood to it. It's not that hard. But it ain't as easy as this. That's not, we need to push that out. There you go. Where's the high point? Right there. How does that high point diverge? You can see it's coming a little bit. There's a little peak right there. The clavicle gets a little bit of its own high point. I'm going to stop here in a second. What are you noticing about the approach to sculpting that I'm doing here? Try to develop some vocabulary and some words. It'll be really important. Oops. In a moment. High point. Do you notice the planes that I'm trying to create? Do you see how I'm abstracting forms? You see that entire shoulder plane? Later on, I'll go in and try to find more information. But right now, this is the iliocostalis that I'm building right here. This is what you'll cover in the course. Iliocostalis. All right, and their longissimus is in the side, along with some structures. This is the longissimus, the multifidus, and then this is the rib mass. And so the rib mass is going to sink inside. So you need to sculpt that form out a little bit. All right, let me pause here as soon as I get a breath. Get that around. We'll work on that. There's yeah, that's wrong. Need a lot more volume right there. Da, 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 da. I want to create a little plateau. Let's get this. Now that I've identified the iliocostalis, the longissimus, we've got the serratus anterior coming down, right? So then what is left of that area? Well, that is rib cage. And this is why we learn anatomy. My Cintiq needs to rest better. There we go. Ribs. But then the external oblique floods over the ribs. The serratus anterior sit on top of that. The latissimus sits on top of that. The pectoralis sits on top of that. The abs go over the top of that. So much fun. But usually that's about when I start to make mistakes. Teres major and the lat, triceps, and there. All right, now notice how I am from these views establishing these elements. So I'm looking at it from these views, and that might actually be a little hard for you to see from the stream. See, my strokes are following the motion of that structure. All right, so what are you picking up out of this process? What is some of the things that you are learning about what we're doing here? And so I want to pause this for a second. Number one, to be able to save this thing. But then two, to give us a moment, a breath, to kind of soak this in. What are we learning? What are we picking up? What's the lesson? You want to start to make these notes as you're going through, if you're not taking notes right now. So let me check in with you guys on the side. Teresa, what I gathered so far is start with landmarks, then planar forms, right? Arthur, so the method is to be very loose and just try to push the shapes of the muscle groups. Yeah. So yeah, you can definitely call this loose. But we have to be a little bit careful, right? Because like I learned in California a long time ago, 33 years ago, I was in art school in California. And loose in California is like loosey-goosey. Well, what we're talking about here with loose that you're seeing on my form is you're talking about essentialized. So it's loose sketching, but it's actually loose sketching almost like an analytical figure drawing. There's a purpose. It's not loosey-goosey, but it's not. I'm also not like gotta turn the form, just gotta get it right. I'm not being tight with it, and so loose is the proper term. It's just we need to be clear, like how. Arthur, what I've learned so far is I'm probably going to have a better time taking the process slow versus how I currently do it fast and aggressive. Is that the construction and form? Great. So this is all about the overarching theme. The overarching theme of what we're doing here is construction. And within the construction framework, we have methodologies and strategies, right? And so right now what we're doing is a structural buildup. And structure just means relationship between parts. So that's what we're doing. We're establishing the structure of it. And so that means the shape of the scapula group. That means the shape of the rib cage. We're establishing the wall of the rib cage versus the latissimus dorsi versus the abs on the other side, right? That's the structure of all of this. And then what we'll do once we get a little further along is we actually just take our microscope and we just go down to another level and we start to find the structure within the latissimus dorsi. Where's the bulk of the form of the latissimus dorsi? Where's that? There's a small shift as it goes and does something. And you just start to take your structural lens closer and closer and closer. And you do that for several layers. And then once you've got those layers, then you can kind of switch your mindset a little bit and you start rounding form and you start creating surface. And so let's get in and see how far we can get today. I literally just saved it and now it wants to save. Okay, but let's turn split screen off. And if we're talking just torso, that's what we got so far. This is actually a moment in which you want to stop. You don't want to pass this. You want to be here. You want your model to look something like this. If your model doesn't look something like this, you need to stop and get it to look something like this. You don't want it to be too refined, too smooth. You want it to be as structural as possible. So I'm going to now start hitting a second stage of form. Actually, first I'm going to check. Just checking. I'm trying to find breaks like that I don't cover. I'm trying to find contours that aren't working, like you see the bulbousness, but then look at that. So I'm trying to find straight lines. Notice how that contour is built versus this, right? So what we see is the point's about right there, and then it just cuts right in like that. I also see right there. That's not properly ID'd. I also can feel that's a little bit iffy. Okay. And I'm okay if things get a little exaggerated, but I am trying to control the exaggeration at this point. There we go. All right, do you see? Working the silhouette. Not too bad. All right, partly because we had a decent start. Okay, let's get the glutes a little bit. Let's get rid of that arm. Giving me trouble. Where's the high point? I'm establishing and looking for contours. Looking for contours. This is part of the constructive process. Sculpting silhouette as I go. Now, when you sculpt these, and you see how much work I did in that? Whew. I'm getting hungry. I need more coffee. And I'm doing a lot of work. Trying to figure out, going a little nuts here. Okay? When we talk about a constructive process, what is really important to me is strategies. Very important. Strategies, very important. Super important. It's everything. Everything I just did was okay, but there's a better strategy that I can use. And so let me show you the better strategy. Why do I keep doing that? Oh, wrong button. I'm going to use a form concept that's in my own mind to make that form. So we'll start here. So I already have a concept in my mind where it's like, all right, there is a tire. This is the side wall of that tire. And now, and that sidewall comes down like that. So that's the tire, that's the tire, that's the tire, the tire. Give it a whole plane. That's the tire, the tire, the tire. Okay, and there you go. And then now, once I have that tire, I come in and I separate what's the gluteus medius from the gluteus maximus. And that's so much quicker than all that cray-cray where I was just tracing the surface. And that's one of the things that you have to be very careful in this approach, is that you're paying attention to small surface changes and they're just controlling you. You need to be able to abstract things out and start to look at long lines and long planes as you go. Does that make sense? Right here, I know... Sorry, wrong one. Right there, that's a very important kind of triangle. I know that triangle exists. The hamstrings are on this side. The gluteus, the vastus lateralis is on this side. And so all of that is something else. Now that's a form concept. That's part of the constructive process. Is I have this intellectualized version of it right there. I went a little overkill. Baby got back. Dun, 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 dun. Okay, a little bit of the erector spinae. This is the multifidus. Multifidus is making a lot of this, but it's covered up with the longissimus, and then the iliocostalis right in there, and the muscles here. These guys. So if you look, I tell students all the time, there's no convexities in nature, right? Concavities. Let's just assume. My teacher told me there's no concavities in nature. Concavities equal death. What there are is there's a series of convexities that are all coming in together to create what the untrained eye would see as a concavity, something that's like a divot in the form. But that's not what we're actually seeing. Let's take a look at the model so you can actually see how, especially there in the back, it looks like there's an arch, but what you're actually seeing is a series of concavities that are filling in the space. And it really requires you to understand the muscle fibers and what the muscle fibers are doing. So the longissimus, the iliocostalis, they basically go from they go this way. They go from the spinous process of the vertebrae to vertebrae higher. And so they're constantly webbing like that. And then the iliocostalis on the other side, they're doing that a little bit differently. They're coming out like this. But every vertebrae, there's a new chunk of the muscle. So we can look over here on the side and we say, hey, that's an arc. But that's not actually an arc. What you're seeing is you're seeing a convexity meeting another convexity, meeting another convexity, meeting another convexity. So that arch that you see is just a series of these forms. And you want to have these forms, these convexities, because if you have those convexities, your models suddenly start to look alive in a way that's, it's hard to understand why. But it's because form is pushing out. Life is present. There's blood flowing. There's movement. There's action. If somebody's dead, everything hollows out. So as we go through this, that's in my mind. My strokes are actually following that process, and I'm trying to get the strokes to indicate this. It's probably one of the most important lessons. Like if you are anywhere good with proportions, then one of the most important next lessons for you is just understanding convexity versus concavity and building convexity into everything that you do. Always checking for it. See these forms? Yeah, I'm building out. And that's just free information, folks, so imagine what's in the actual course. Bum, bum, ba, na, 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 na. See that bulk right there? This is me taking my structural lens lower. Now, at a certain point, and we're actually right there, at a certain point, the clay brush just is not as effective. It becomes actually a problem. And so where are we at? Oh, yeah, we're right at our limit. So that's going to be one of the probably the best things for me to show you is once you've got this much form made, the next step is going to be to switch tools. Let me just get, there's a couple of things to point out here. I'm basically establishing the side plane, right? Okay, but we have the leg, and so I've got to get a little bit of that form, and I got to get the leg in here. But along the way, you remember from the other side, there was that little triangle. The triangle's here too. Hamstring, vastus lateralis on this side. So I was just going in and sculpting it, and I thought I'd just make it more apparent. That's like, there you go. All right, we'll leave all of that alone. Why am I focused on this? Let's build this plane. You see I'm building that. That's how I build surface. One end, I've already defined the other end, and then I'm going to just fill the space in between. This is how we do, this is large-scale constructive process. All right, that's enough. Let's stop for a second. I am getting tired, and I want to just say this is a good stopping point. And let me see if I can get you reference as well while I wait for you guys to tell me what have you learned now out of this process. What have you learned? I'm going to look for some reference real quick. I want to show you guys that this is actually a stage sculptors have been doing for a long time. What are you learning? What are you picking up? Oh, I forgot this reference is weird. Yeah. That won't work. Okay, let's go through questions. Hey Ryan, in your course, will you review your work, our work, and give feedback? So yeah, we do that in Discord. And so the goal when I'm not actually building this hardcore, is to go in and have scheduled feedback sessions. So I'm hopeful to do the first one while I'm in Pietrasanta in July. Teresa, the tip about the glutes being like the sidewall and the triangle was very helpful. That part is tough for me. Yeah. There's a lot of areas that are tough for me like that too. And it's just when you learn these little tricks, quote unquote tricks, these are structural hacks. That's the gold. Because oftentimes we're treating it intellectual, but it's not. It's you got to think differently. Opening enrollment. So yes. So let's go through this again. So yeah, the course tomorrow night it closes like an hour, like basically 9 o'clock my time, I think. Is that really 10 o'clock? Did I choose 10 o'clock? I do not want to be up at 10 o'clock. But it closes tomorrow night, and it's going to close for a while. So if you want to get in, please get in. You can always go and choose the monthly option, and then you can right now just go get free, look at the limited access one. And the limited access one will take you, you'll get the start here, so you can get our community access. You can get through the sculpting basics, the anatomy basics, and then it stops right here. So this is where the free one stops. The Get My Scans, that, and the Robo Figures, that you got to enroll in the full course. Okay, but you get the drawovers, you get the 3D drawovers, you get the sculpting basics. So there's me showing you how to do the eye, me showing you how to do the ear, and these are casts that these casts are provided. So you can see the Michelangelo's ear. Those casts you get so that you can do the work, right? And I highly recommend get this. If you're not going to do anything else, get this, because this is, this took me a long time to sort out, where I worked out a lot of the traditional approaches to things and built the digital equivalent, along with really my most important lesson, which is sculpting the sphere. That's super important. Yeah. And then, of course, you can get my brushes right there. So let us move to the next stage. So I'm going to save this. And I'm going to show you the next stage for literally 5-10 minutes. Not long. Let's just let this file save. These strokes and this structural approach, some people might look at it as a mess, but please, by the end of this course, you'll see this as important structure. All right, we're just waiting for this thing to finish saving. And then let's kill the undo histories. Perfect. All right, let's duplicate this. And so now let's go back into split mode. So now I'm going to switch my tactics. I'm going to use the rake brush, and I'm going to go and set my in-depth to 3, my embed. So it's brush, depth, embed. I just often mix the words. I say in-depth, which makes no sense. So let's start to pick out a form like this. The goal here is just to start to integrate planes. You can build form with this as well. Yeah, there we go. See how I'm really perfecting the way that moves in, and I'm getting a nice roundness. And building convexity. This brush, this tool also has limitations. They all do, right? So we're going to talk about its limitations here in 1 second. As soon as I get a decent canvas here. So I'm chasing planes. You see, I can feel like that's a flat plane, but I have a roundness right there, right? And ultimately, look at the model from above as much as you can until you've developed the ability to see flat verse. And look, you see that rib coming out? And then this is coming up underneath. It appears to be a concavity, but it's not. Trust me, it's just the muscle fibers. They're connecting in a way that gives that illusion. All right. Okay, so now we have cleaned up that form a little bit. Let's go ahead and show the difference. Here we're just massing. Here we're starting to clean this up, and now this is going to become a canvas for us. And you know, look, like now we're starting to get a lot more of this contour, whereas that's like, you know, it's got a lot of cray-cray going on in there. But now, once we've got this established, the next thing for me to do is, let's look at our reference. And I'm going to go in with a standard brush. And it's really only the standard brush. The standard brush is the one that does this. It's like a little knife tool. And you see I'm drawing in these forms. Okay. All right, there you go. So the only way you can really get these forms is with the standard brush usually, or some sort of knife tool, right? And then once that's done, there's a couple of ways that we can go about kind of getting the contour. So you can come in with the clay, with the rake brush, but I'm going to show you another method, and that's going to wrap up our lesson today. We're going to actually use the clay brush, that same brush that created these strokes. And let's just reset this to the round alpha. And then I'll go and I'll set my depth embed to 1. Okay, so again, that's depth embed to 1. And then here, I'm going to just kind of, it's like I'm laying, I'll sometimes be pressing Alt. Sometimes not. But I'm using this to kind of fill surface area. You make a larger brush, you'll make a bigger, flatter plane. Very light. It's almost like a smooth brush. I need to flatten that plane that was created, that I created there. And this doesn't happen in a YouTube stream, right? Like this, you guys know that this is all stuff that takes time. And you could spend, if you're an atelier, you could spend a month on some of these exercises. My goal is to help shorten that time, but at the end of the day, like I would be doing you a disservice if I was telling you like there was a shortcut, because there's not. You have to learn form. And the longer you spend staring at the form and trying to understand all of this, the better off you are going to be in the long run, and the stronger your work is going to be, really. Now I'm going to do a couple more things. I'm lightly smoothing. Let's do color, fill object. Use the standard brush, and you'll see a lot of people that have been using ZBrush for a while. The standard brush is just like a go-to for going in and chasing form, and really kind of starting to establish that surface quality. It takes just time and really just focus. And you smooth a lot. But it's a great tool for this. Do you see some of the form starting to emerge? Lots of ways to finish this. Any last questions, folks, before we call it a day? Thank you so much for being here. Means the world to me. All right, I'll leave it at somewhere right around there. A lot more to be done, but this will give us a good structural perspective. There you go. A little bit of everything. A little bit of everything. All right. Arthur, this is such a cool approach. Yeah, definitely want to leave the noise in there. Asaid, happy you are watching this. Arthur, referencing every angle and detail you can and before pushing the shape further, making sure to check if the silhouette lines up with the ref. I think you're asking a question. There's a question mark. Otherwise, you were responding. So, all right, team. Thank you. Again, thank you. So we're going to do this again tomorrow. Tomorrow, we are going to sculpt a head from imagination. So I'm giving myself the challenge to create a head that I think is cool and exciting, which revolves around me playing with the rules of the head. And that's really what we want to unpack, is we want to unpack that there's structural rules, and you play with those rules and you can start to design things, which is what you're doing when you imagine it. I'm just going to imagine something and start to design and play with ideas to see if I can get something that looks cool. It doesn't look like I often go orc or something else, and I always I'm always looking for something else that's unexpected. But you'll get to see that tomorrow. We'll go through and try to do something from imagination. Today, I would love it, guys. Just leave a comment once this gets posted, and I post the replay in the community. Just let me know the coolest one takeaway you got. Really, I appreciate you guys. Thank you so much. And so now let's remind you all, you got a day. So come join me. Let's get in and master sculpting. And through mastering sculpting and developing the sculptor's eye, get in there and master form, which is going to work for you as a painter. It's going to work for you as a draftsman, as a concept designer. So many different fields where this is important. All right, you got a day. Thank you. Teresa, that's I will. I'm glad you were here, so thank you. All right, take care. Ciao.